ratios. We put buffers on top so that we're not flying close to the regulatory minimums.
Revenue diversification and the challenges faced.
One of the concerns I had when you were unveiling the ABSA Asset Management was that you were venturing into the space at a time when the investable opportunities in the capital markets were clearly being eroded.
Risk pricing beyond the rate cap regime.
Yeah, we do a lot of modeling of our business and of our customers and the risks that we're willing to take.
In the next edition of Business Redefined, we host the Chief Executive Officer of ABSA Bank for this and more.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Lina.
Thank you for making us.
Thank you for making us your favorite drive show crew.
National FM, we love you.
Oh, thank you, people. This is the podcast I'm stitches. I got you good.
Nyiwa jamaa mechizi yani.
Tunajibamba na show yenyu. Muendelee hivyo hivyo.
I came to rap it up, do my things, my
Thank you for listening to 96.3 Nation FM.
Of course, Antona Obina.
And Obina.
Call him taking control.
Mad love, mad respect. Wow, photo.
I run the city.
Akili, 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 akili. Let's chase the germs away. Let's chase the germs away by keeping our hands clean. And when you want to sneeze or when you want to cough, do it in your elbow. Let's practice sneezing into your elbow. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Achoo! Again. Achoo! Yay! You did it! Germs, germs, germs. They make us sick. Germs, germs, germs are not our friends. Germs, germs, germs. They make us sick. Germs, germs, germs. Germs, germs, germs are not your friends.
This is NTV.
Good morning, East Africa, and wherever else you are joining us from. Welcome to your world this 15th day of February. Now, the world marks the International Epilepsy Awareness Day on the February 4th, and this is a day set aside to acknowledge and highlight the challenges faced by those living with epilepsy, their families, and their carers. This is because epilepsy, commonly known as kifafa, is shrouded by so many myths and misconceptions, creating stigma and discrimination for those living with this condition. Today, we hear from some of those who walk in these shoes and, of course, learn more about the condition in a moment. My name is Gladys Gachanja, and this is Your World. As I mentioned, today we take time to understand the intricacies of epilepsy. Now, did you know that 2% of Kilifi residents live with epilepsy? We find out why. KQ vows to transport COVID-19 vaccines. And now that we're off that Valentine's weekend, a couple celebrates this day virtually. Thank you for making time to join us on this 15th day of February. And definitely the question to you this morning, even as we learn more about epilepsy, is do you know someone or are you living with epilepsy? What are the challenges you face? Could be treatment, stigma, whatever experience you've had living with this condition or caring for somebody with epilepsy. Let us know. That hashtag is new normal, and you can also reach us using those numbers at the bottom of your screen. But before we get to that conversation, let's take a look at the effects of COVID-19 around the world. And this morning, that number stands at 109,387,415 confirmed cases globally. Out of that number, 81,622,081 have recovered, and unfortunately 2,411,445 have succumbed to COVID-19. So how does it look like in Kenya? As per yesterday's briefing, that number stands at 102,867 confirmed cases in the country, 85,008 totally recovered from the same. Remember, home-based care really being lauded for the success rate, and 1,795 Kenyans have succumbed to COVID-19. Well, staying with the ongoing pandemic and in the country, Kenya Airways, which is eyeing transport contracts for COVID-19 vaccines with the Kenyan government and regional blocs, insists that the national carrier has a capacity to transport and store the inoculations during a media tour of cargo facilities at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. With passenger traffic in a slump, airlines are turning to freight to fill the gap, and Kenya Airways spies an advantage in the market to deliver temperature-sensitive COVID vaccines in its expertise in flying fresh roses to Europe. Some 3,000 tons of flowers are currently exported every week from Nairobi's International Airport under demanding cool storage conditions akin to those required to safely ship COVID vaccines. Jobs earmarked for Africa risk spoilage if not transported within precise temperature ranges, from ground handling to shipment and delivery, a logistical feat beyond many infrastructure-poor countries on the continent. Further afield, and Ivorian officials inaugurate a professional development center (PDC) in Abidjan, which, with French assistance, is to train over 10,000 teachers in 5 years from 15 countries in French-speaking sub-Saharan Africa, where more than half of all students start secondary school without knowing how to read or write. Now, Kandi Akamara, Ivorian Education Minister, says the culmination of a rigorous and demanding process, this innovative center is a timely response to pressing needs in educational engineering, pre-service training, and ongoing capacity building. Jean-Christophe, a former director of the French Lay Mission, says taking into account our historical links and the very close proximity of our education systems, but also the evolutions and specificities of each one, creating a training center in Ivory Coast for French education personnel, but also for Ivorian private education personnel, was an additional building block to our joint enterprise.
De la même façon, on va ajouter la dame, adjectif qualificatif, elle va devenir elle.
Donc je vous conseille les noms communs. Si vous avez un doute, vous vérifiez dans le dictionnaire. Ça sent la cantine.
Elsewhere, Hopewell Chinono didn't set out to become an internet sensation when he made a song about corruption in Zimbabwe, but that's exactly what happened when he uploaded them loot to Twitter. Now, the outspoken Zimbabwean journalist has been arrested 3 times in 6 months for tweets protesting graft.
It was just so natural. I was sitting where I'm sitting now in my study, and I was reading a book, and I got mentally tired of reading. So I just started playing a reggae track and just started singing and recording at the same time. It was not planned. I didn't actually write the lyrics. They were just coming out of my head. It was a freestyle type of singing. And I was surprised that within 30 minutes of posting it on Twitter, it had been retweeted over 1,000 times. And 24 hours later, it had been watched on different platforms more than 500,000 times, which meant that it was an art form that the youths are comfortable with, and it enabled us to have a discussion about serious issues that are affecting our country with something that was fun. It is very surreal in a way because I never thought it was going to turn out that way. But I'm comfortable with being an internet sensation because it's helping our issues to be put on the table and for the global audience to discuss the Zimbabwean problem. It was addressing the issues that involve the same government officials, the failure to invest in our healthcare system.
Now, at a room in her house in the heart of the Dakala oasis in Egypt's western desert, 72-year-old Friedel Braun from Germany uses the melody of her tambourine to meditate. The Bedouin-style house of Friedel Braun is built with mud bricks and palm fronds, and the land has a hot water spring rich with sulfur that is used to water the plants of the garden. Guests can also bath in it in a pond built in the garden. Friedel came back in Bir Al-Jabal in 2003. She came back a year after, and the owner gave her a part of a garden next to which she and her husband built the Bedouin-style home. From 2005 to 2011, she says she was receiving guests from Germany for meditation sessions and thermal cures, but numbers have dwindled since the Arab Spring and the pandemic. And to the focus of our conversation this morning, November is marked globally as the Epilepsy Awareness Month, and focus is shifting to Kilifi County, which is increasingly reporting high cases of the disease. A recent study by the Cambry Wellcome Trust reveals that at least 2% of the population in Kilifi County is living with epilepsy, a neurological disorder that causes abnormalities in the brain. Kevin Mutai now reports on the Cambry study, which is informing intervention measures in the county.
At the Epilepsy Clinic in Kilifi County, we encountered tens of patients, both adults and children, seeking treatment. The clinic is busy and sees at least 40 patients per day.
We found that about 2% of the people in Kilifi will have a form of epilepsy.
Epilepsy may occur as a result of a genetic disorder.
Nilipatana kora wanaitwa wakali kwanza. Wakanivamia wakanikatakata mapanga, hata ile kitu nishtukia tu niko hospitali Pandia.
Before the attack, Rongoma, who is a father of 10, used to be a driver at a government institution but was forced to quit the job over his condition.
Sijui ni kitu gani chenye kilimfanya mpaka akawa sasa anaenda kombo.
Ukaangalia kwa mwisho wake wakaja wakaona pale mahali nilikatwa ingia ndani ambapo kuna kraka sasa, ambao sasa damu ilikuwa inaingia ndani ambao ilisafisha. Kuna kraka sasa ya damu ST tembea vizuri. Sasa ikawa mara nyingine ndio inaanguka.
Scientists at the Cambry Wellcome Trust also revealed that children with malaria or birth-associated injuries are likely to develop epilepsy or any form of mental illness. such as learning retardation, cerebral palsy, deafness, or loss of vision. According to researchers, other causes of the disease may include uncooked pork, parasitic infections, bacterial infections, or febrile convulsions in children.
Yaani akicheza kwa jua ndo mwili unapanda moto na kupanda moto ndo vinamwangusha.
Some of them come in with delayed neurodevelopmental milestones. For instance, they come in, maybe a baby is at, let's say, 6 months, they tell you they've not been able to support their neck, or maybe maybe parents observe some abnormal movements of maybe the limbs, or even maybe the head, they do like head nodding.
According to the study, more than 1 million people in Kenya have epilepsy, and in Kilifi County alone, over 70% of the affected people fail to seek medical attention due to traditional beliefs and misconceptions associated with the disease, such as witchcraft, poverty, illiteracy, social stigma, among others. The study also shows that death occurs in 33 out of every 1,000 people with epilepsy each year.
When we did some community-based studies and we compared those people with epilepsy versus those without epilepsy, we actually realized that there were 6 times more likely to die than those people without epilepsy.
Most of the people who come to this clinic have to undergo an electroencephalogram examination, which detects abnormalities in the brain using small electrodes attached to the scalp, and the electoral cells communicate via electrical impulses.
We are mostly motivated by the fact that we need to generate numbers and evidence that can be used to inform policy both locally and internationally. And we are also setting up a group of participants, both children and adults, that we can follow up towards the future and be able to understand the course and trajectory of the disease, including the risk of dying.
It is estimated that 70 million people across the world suffer from epilepsy, 80% from developed countries. Kevin Mutai, NTV.
Well, definitely a lot of information that comes out of that piece done by Kevin Mutai on the prevalence of epilepsy in Kilifi County. And I'm sure you've got a couple of questions and they will be answered here this morning, even as we understand epilepsy much better. Now, to help us along with this conversation, I'm joined in studio with Dr. Eddie Chengo. He is an epilepsy specialist, what they call an epileptologist. We're also joined in the other studio by Sally Njenga, who is a person living with epilepsy. Next to her is Millicent Kadarani, who is a caregiver to a son living with epilepsy. And we also have Frederick Beuchi, who is well known as an epilepsy awareness activist. Thank you for joining us on this conversation. I'll start off with you, Dr. but before we get to the details of it, let's first define what epilepsy is so that we are all on the same page, and Dr. will give us more details. Epilepsy is a central nervous system neurological disorder in which brain activity becomes abnormal, causing seizures or periods of an unusual behavior, sensations, and sometimes loss of awareness. Now, epilepsy, if you were to think about some of the symptoms, again, you will hear here, it depends on the kind of seizures you get, but the most common are temporary confusion, a staring spell, uncontrollable jerking in movements of the arms and legs, loss of consciousness or awareness, and psychic symptoms such as fear, anxiety, or even deja vu. Now, here's the thing, and I think we need to just put it out there that epilepsy is usually treatable when detected early, and more than 80% of patients can actually become seizure-free. And another thing we need to underscore is that epilepsy is not contagious. You cannot get epilepsy by touching the saliva or other bodily fluids of somebody who lives with this condition. Now that we have set that base, let's understand epilepsy more. So, Dr. we've said it's something that affects the brain. So what exactly is happening in the brain to cause the seizures?
Okay, thank you very much, Gladys. What happens in the brain is basically miscommunication. Let me share with you an example. If I have 10 balls in my hands and then I throw one to you, you'll definitely catch it. If I throw 2, you'll go like, yeah. If I throw 3, you'll go like, if I throw 10, you may stand statue, you'll not move. So basically, what happens in the brain is just like miscommunication. There's a lot of information that is confusing to the nerve cell that, you know, you can't do an activity depending on the nerve cell that is affected. And as you said, then it can present with abnormal behavior, abnormal sensation and feeling, or movement. So that is what happens in the brain. And when I go deep, at least maybe for the viewers to understand, you know, our brain has some chemicals of some kind, and these chemicals sometimes causes some imbalance. We have what we call excitatory neurotransmitters and inhibitory neurotransmitters. And when these cause imbalance, then you will have an abnormal symptom, which can be, as I said, an abnormal movement or sensation, or it can be an abnormal behavior or a convulsive, you know, thing.
Okay, so you're saying, with the analogy of the balls, is that your mind gets confused, you know? So what causes the confusion? How come one person is getting confused and the other person would react differently?
Okay, that's a good question. Now, it depends on which part of the brain is affected. Our brain functions are different depending on the part. So, for instance, our frontal lobe, our frontal part of the brain has different function compared to our back of the brain or our temporal areas or the side of the brain. So, for instance, if you have an abnormal, you know, miscommunication at the back of your brain, then your symptoms will be more visual compared to one on the frontal, which will be more of maybe psychic and some motor movements or movements. So basically, it depends on which part of the brain is affected.
So is that why we were saying earlier on the symptoms vary depending on the seizure?
Exactly. And there are so many symptoms and so many types of epilepsy and syndromes. Over 40 types of epilepsy and almost 30 identified syndromes of epilepsy.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay, now you'll give us more precise common reasons as to why people suffer from this condition. But let's hear from those that actually live this reality. I'll start off with you, Sally. When were you diagnosed with epilepsy?
Thank you, Gladys. I was diagnosed back in 2004. By then I was 12 years old, but I was informed later in 2008 after visiting Kawe, Kenya Association for People Living with Epilepsy.
And what are these symptoms you were dealing with?
At first, the symptoms were really simple. I would jerk maybe one hand, and then it later on moved to falling, but I would never lose consciousness. I would remain conscious at all times. I would hear you, but I would not respond.
Okay, and how long would that symptom go on for?
Less than 4 minutes.
Okay, and after you got out of it, would you remember what happened?
Yes, I would. I would remember everything because, as I said earlier, I never lose consciousness.
Yes. Okay, so you say you were diagnosed in 2004, but actually got to find out that you had epilepsy in much later. Why the discrepancy?
Okay, in 2004, the doctors said it is just general epilepsy and they were just treating symptoms. There's one doctor who said he was treating phobia. But later, when we went now to Kawe, that is when the doctor looked at the EEG test and said, no, this is the bitter truth. You may not want to hear it, but you have epilepsy.
Oh, wow. And at that point, when you were given that news, what was going through your mind?
Well, for lack of better words, I would say for a while my world stopped. I was just a teenager. You get lost. You've never had anyone in your family with such a condition. It was really confusing. And with people being so harsh, especially my teachers. It really was hard.
Okay, and we'll talk more about your experience with epilepsy as we go along with this conversation. Let's hear from Mama Sam. She's called Millicent, and she is a caregiver to a young man who lives with epilepsy. Millicent, ulijua Sam ako na kifafa akiwa na umri upi?
Akiwa 18 after high school.
Okay, nini ilifanyika?
Mara ya kwanza alianguka wakiwa na dada yake huko Githurai wakishuka gari. Mara ya pili nilipigiwa simu nikiwa kazini na majirani ati Sam ameanguka, hawezi ongea. Sasa mara ya tatu nilikuwa round. Nilikuwa kwa balcony nikianika manguo. Akakuja akasimama hapo karibu na mimi, nikaona tu akienda alafu akaanguka, akaanza kutetemeka.
Na sasa kutetemeka ndio hizo seizures tunasema. Kuna kitu kingine alikuwa anafanya?
Alikuwa anatetemeka, alafu akaanguka, but akaanza sasa, alikuwa na behave abnormal because alikuwa ana behave ni kama kichwa yake sio mzuri. Anaamka, ananipoint. Alafu ndio sasa tukamchukua tukampeleka kwa nyumba akishawacha kuconvulse.
Na wakati huo mlikuwa mnajua ni kifafa ama?
Hatukukuwa tunajua, but majirani nafikiri kuna wale washa deal na hiyo case. Kuna jirani alisema ni kifafa. Hiyo siku walimpeleka kwa, niliwaambia juu nilikuwa kazini, wakanipigia nikawaambia mumpeleke tu hata kwa chemist at least wajaribu kujua ni nini. Walimpea tu dawa zingine. But I think hiyo ilikuwa 2017 ikienda kuisha. 2018 sasa ndio tukaamua kumpeleka Kiambu District Hospital. Tulipompeleka huko wakapima damu, wakasema hakuna shida. Wakatutuma Mathare Mental afanyiwe kitu inaitwa EEG. Sasa kabla sijampeleka huko nikampeleka, kuna hospitali iko hapa Mathare inaitwa German Doctors. Kampeleka hapo tena wakaniambia tu the same thing, tuende EEG. Sasa juu nilikuwa na barua kutoka Kiambu, kaniambia nimpeleke na hiyo. Kampeleka huko akafanyiwa EEG, ndio tukakuja kujua kuna hiyo epilepsy.
Na sasa wakati mlijua ni kifafa, ni kitu mlikuwa mnasikia for the first time ama mlikuwa na mtu kwenye familia alikuwa naye?
Kwa familia hakuna mtu ako nayo.
Wakati usaidia ya bwana na pia yako?
Hakuna.
Aha. All right, let me ask the same question to Sally. Do you have a family member with this condition?
I was the first one to have epilepsy, but currently I have a small sister, so we are two.
So two of you live with epilepsy?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear from Frederick. Frederick, your story is also that of a caregiver. How did you come to terms with epilepsy?
Thank you so much, Gladys, for having me this morning. My story about epilepsy and finding myself in this space is because I have been taking care of a sister who has been having or was diagnosed with epilepsy at the age of 2 years old. Her name is Mercy, and as Dr. will mention that if one person has epilepsy in a family, indirectly she or he affects about 5 people. And so being the firstborn in that family, I found myself indirectly being affected in a way that our attention had to shift now in seeing how best we could help our sister.
Now, you say 2 years old. What were these symptoms that made it very clear it was epilepsy?
What I can remember vividly is we had a background of understanding what epilepsy is, or maybe from just hearing it from people. So our general knowledge about that was seeing a person falling down and having some what we call seizure or the fits. But for our sister, before we knew that, we noticed that there was first, by that age, she wasn't able to communicate well. The speech was sluggish. And then as she continued to grow up, we noticed also she would have twitches that were not major, but you could tell sometimes she's having some twitches of the hand uncontrollably for either seconds, rolling of the eyes, shaking of the head. Those were some small bits of what we could notice then, that at some point we began thinking this wasn't very normal.
Okay, and you say you had at least prior information about epilepsy, but was this the first case of epilepsy in your family?
Yes, definitely. It was our first case in our family. It's something that personally I had never experienced before, with just the background of watching the movie of Jesus and seeing him healing a person with the epilepsy then. But it's totally something that was very new from seeing it in reality. So I encountered it in a real situation when my sister was diagnosed with the condition.
All right, so Daktari, just listening to all their stories, it seems that there are some people who develop the seizures in childhood, like Frederick's sister, while others have their first seizure in their middle age, teenagehood. Why the discrepancy?
You know, epilepsy is a very varied condition, and majorly many people will start epilepsy at an early age, but most of the people, maybe around I would say 40–50%, sometimes 60%, we may not identify what caused the epilepsy, but we just relate it to either genetic or you know, inheritance and that kind of thing. And one of the reasons why it starts at childhood could be, you know, the injuries which happen during childhood. For instance, birth problems, problems that happens during birth and injure the brain. You know, infections of the brain, for example, cerebral malaria or malaria that affects the brain. Infections like meningitis, which mostly happen during childhood, can also increase the prevalence of epilepsy in childhood. But also, we understand that most of the epilepsies also starts in childhood and teenage. There are specific types of epilepsy that are well defined, and we call these syndromes, with clear clinical history, very clear EEG findings or electroencephalograph findings, and definitely a very clear outcome. You know, you can clearly tell that this type of epilepsy, 80% of the people will outgrow it at the age of 16 or 18, you know. So most of these epilepsies start at childhood. But also literature is also telling us that now we know more of epilepsies that even start at adulthood. And this could be as a result of sometimes, you know, diseases, for example, stroke, if you get stroke in adulthood, if you get tumors of the brain, brain injuries as a result of an accident. This can also cause epilepsy in adulthood. Yes.
Okay, is there any of it related to hormonal changes by any chance?
Hormonal changes is a triggering factor more than a cause, you know, because we have triggers of epilepsy. You can have epilepsy, but there's something that triggers the seizures or the fits. So hormonal imbalances triggers, and we know that there's a type of epilepsy that can occur maybe at around, you know, particularly in ladies, you know, so that happens maybe at around the monthly periods and that kind of thing.
All right.
Yes.
You touched on some of the risk factors that can actually put you at crossroads with epilepsy. What else is there? Because clearly we can hear there's no genetic connection for all our panelists, but for some there is some genetic connection.
Okay, now Gladys, I would say that is a little bit tricky because we also understand that family history is very, very important, you know, in causation of epilepsy. And sometimes there are some epilepsies that outgrow you at some point. So it will stay for like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, maybe 10 years, and then it will outgrow you.
So are
some
you
of
saying,
the epilepsies...
So are you saying it can be cured?
Yes, it can be cured. 80% will will live normal lives if they start anti-epileptic drugs early enough. And even we know there are some epilepsy types that even without treatment, in quotes, you know, I would say that because you really require treatment for that. But we know that these epilepsies are benign or they will outgrow you. I'll give you an example. There's a type of epilepsy that is called childhood absence epilepsy. It starts in childhood, and then we know at teenage there, it will outgrow you. Only around 20%, maybe they will have other epilepsy types in future. And we also know some other types of epilepsies, for instance, benign Rolandic epilepsy, and also some of the neonatal seizures that just occur for a small period of time and then they will outgrow you, with or without treatment. But, caution, it's very important that we take our treatment for obvious reasons, that event, when it happens, you can fall and hurt yourself badly, or you can choke and something bad can happen. So it's very important that we control the seizures. And more so, we also know that from literature that when treatment starts early, then the curability of epilepsy also
increases.
Yes,
okay.
Increases.
Interesting. Yes. So are you actually saying that you can live with epilepsy and not ever know you had it, or if you outgrew it, to use your words?
Yes, I think you can. If you had like 2 seizures, for instance, like some epilepsy type, you can have like 2, 3 seizures and then boom, it goes. You never have it again. And nobody told you that, you never went to hospital.
Interesting.
So, yeah, so how will you know that you had epilepsy?
Okay.
Yes.
All right. We'll talk about more of the diagnosis, because I think this is what now separates those that know and those who do not know. And I'm told you are already talking to us on that question of the day. Do you know someone, or are you living with epilepsy, and what are the challenges you face? And remember, that's hashtag new normal. Zadi Moha says, one of my sister's kids are among the people who live with epilepsy, but alhamdulillah, it's atrial from Allah. We hear you. Thank you for sharing. Mose Kinuthia says, it's tough. Tell us more, Kinuthia. We have Edna McKenna who says, my baby used to, but is now healed. Struggled for 1 year, going to doctors and neuros, but I thank God I met a friend who introduced me to herbal medicine and it went away. It's now 3 years and the convulsions free and stress free. Okay, we'll talk more about that. Shalaga says, yes, my cousin lives with epilepsy. It's been hard. He had to leave school because no one could handle it. The seizures have totally affected his mental capacity. I wish there was treatment for epilepsy. Good news, there actually is treatment for this condition. And as you heard, Daktari, if this is actually arrested early, the chances of you actually totally curing it is higher. Now, let's hear about the challenges coming or living with this condition. And Sally, you mentioned that you had tough times living with this condition, especially in your schooling days. Tell us more.
Okay. The first attack I had, I was in school. I was in class 7. The school dogs were released. So it was really confusing because everybody thought I was shaking because of fright. But my sister helped, and then after that there were so many seizures that followed. But at the same time, Embu is a cold place, so everybody would think I'm shivering because it's cold and I've fallen. And after that, now my mom saw one scenario at home, and immediately I think she realized it was not normal. And she took me to Aga Khan, and from there, the doctors now started treating generalized epilepsy. I was just given medication. I remember I was told, you just need to take this medication for 3 years, and then you will be okay. But in 2008, now the story was different. In school, it is challenging because people do not understand what you are going through. For instance, in high school, I remember one time I got an attack and my mom was called and I was locked in the dormitory and nobody could be allowed to talk to me. The matron locked me, and my mom came all the way from Nairobi to Embu just because she has been told I cannot stay there. And I remember the principal now telling her at that point that you don't have to take care of her and take her to the hospital because this is what will kill her. So yes, it is harsh out there, especially in school. It's tough.
Wow, wow. Now you have been living with this condition. You're an adult now. Is it any different out here?
Okay, thank you. It's not any easier. What you do is you understand yourself and you just create a tough skin because you will get employed, you will do your duties, but once maybe you get an attack or twice, you lose your job. That is how I lost my first job in 2015. But it doesn't mean right now I'm not employed. Actually, I have a boss who knows I live with epilepsy and he does not even have a problem about it. So you somehow get to understand yourself, know your triggers. Mine basically is stress. So how do I control my stress? And then that's it, I think.
Aha. Okay, let's hear from Millicent. Sasa wakati ulijua Sama akona kifafa, kuna watu wanaona ndio huyu anashinda akianguka, maisha yalikuwa vipi?
Sasa vile alianza kuanguka mara ya kwanza, sikukuwa na shida na watu, but mimi binafsi nilikuwa napitia ugumu. Cause nilikuwa worried, nikiwa kazini nikipokea strange number, nasema tu sasa Sama ameanguka. But tulipojua ni kifafa alafu akajoin hiyo group ya Youth on the Move, alikuwa naenda huko wanasoma, alafu pia sisi wazazi tulikuwa tunaenda huko tunafundishwa zaidi. Nikakuja kuiovercome juu sasa niliona, unajua ukienda kule watu wako unaona hauko peke yako. Hivyo ndo tulikuja kuovercome, but sio rahisi, kukuwa rahisi, but nashukuru kwa sababu hizo mafunzo tulipata kwa Youth on the Move ilisaidia, hata Sam ilimsaidia sana, na sasa anaishi tu maisha normal, anaishi tu normal.
Okay, lakini wakati hamkuwa mnajua ni nini inaleta hii shida ya kuanguka kila wakati, kupata seizures, au kupata hata kutoka ushago watu wakisema ukuje apewe miti ni shamba?
Watu wengi, nilikuja kugundua watu wengi wana believe tu ni uchawi. Ukiambia tu mtu anasema tu hiyo ni uchawi, wengine wanasema hiyo ni ya kusukumiwa. But mimi huwa uchawi iko, but huwa siweki akili sana kwa uchawi. Sasa nilipompeleka hospitali na wakagundua ni hiyo, ndio ni ngumu, sio rahisi. Lazima utajiuliza maswali hapa na pale. But tulikuja tu kukubali, na vile alianza kutumia hizo dawa, hiyo condition alirudi akakuwa tu sawa.
Aha. Okay, and for you, Frederick, what was the experience like watching your sister grow up with this condition? You as a family, you understand it, but the world doesn't.
Yeah, well, the understanding of epilepsy, really, it's not something I would say you would pick up on it and say this is the much that I know about epilepsy. For us as a family, and me in particular, I really had to take a lot of time to an extent of even quitting my job to just come home and help mom take care of the sister, because she had also tried as much as she could to understand what was happening, and it was really weighing down upon her. So just like any other person, they would go on Google, they will read books, they will try to ask questions from people, and you know, the perspective also of the area and the community that we were living in, already everyone had their own thinking about what this condition is all about. So the understanding, honestly, Gladys, was a very tough thing to get to a point of really knowing what this was and what approach we were going to take in terms of helping the sister to get treatment.
What are some of the challenges she had to face?
Growing up, and because she was diagnosed when she was still young, a child looking forward to go to school, a child looking forward to interact with other children, playing. These are some of the things that she never got to really enjoy growing up because we delayed getting proper information to get her treatment start early. So it didn't give her an opportunity to live a normal life at that point when every other child wants to have an opportunity to interact and learn and even play with the rest of the children. So the biggest challenge here was trying to find a better way of putting her under treatment that will normalize her life. And I would say that challenge came as a result of lack of information. We didn't have as much of information that we really needed to really see how best we could really help her at that point in time.
Frederick, how is she doing today?
Wow, it's actually what now gives me a lot of courage and confidence to still talk and share information and knowledge about epilepsy, because I have seen her coming from a point of when she was having seizures after every 20 minutes to now counting about 5 years of being seizure free. And she's now 14 years old, and I think she's a living proof that epilepsy is manageable and epilepsy is treatable when you have the right information at the right time to take an action on the right treatment. Then you will help this person live their normal life.
Very well said. And Dr. I think it has been underscored, knowing what you're dealing with will actually attract timely treatment. So how exactly do you, or what are the clear indicators that this is epilepsy? Because we've also had that there are health practitioners who also don't identify it.
Sure.
So what do you look out for?
Wow, that's a good question, Gladys. And it's just clinical history, what the patient tells you. It requires intelligent listening. It requires vast knowledge, you know, on the symptoms and what they mean. And why I say intelligent listening is because, you know, when you see something, especially a convulsive seizure, you know, you get terrified. So you really have to be calm as a doctor to pick out what really happened during that episode, because you might end up treating something else. And even when two parents have seen the same convulsion and you sit with them and ask them, how did it happen? One of them will tell you, maybe the mom will tell, she turned the head on one side. That's very important for me. That turning head, rolling eyes upwards or deviating of the eyes, very critical for me, you know. And the father will tell you, I just saw him, you know, down and frothing, and that's it. So, you know, that history could not give us more information and treat epilepsy there. So number one is clinical history. Clinical history, clinical history, clinical history is very key. And then other investigations like the EEG, I think, which Sally said, and also I think Mama Millicent said, and also I think Fred also, Mercy had to go some EEGs to be able to come up with a medical diagnosis of the type of epilepsy that she has, so that we can treat it with the right medication. You know, because you need epilepsy, as I said, so many syndromes. And when you identify that this is the type of epilepsy, this is the name of the syndrome that this person is suffering, you can even know the outcome. And that helps us as clinicians, and more importantly also to the parent. Every parent wants to understand how will it end? What's the outcome?
Yes.
You know. So it's clinical history, just understanding that. That's the first step.
And most critical, yeah?
Yes, very critical.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, I understand we have a caller from Nairobi. Maureen, what's your question or comment? Maureen, what's your question or comment? Maureen, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hi, Maureen. Please reduce the volume on your radio or TV.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We seem to be having a technical hitch with that voice. Okay, again, if you can speak up. All right, then. Please call us back and we'll see how we can connect to you. And Daktari, there is something that has come up even as the panelists talk about their various experiences with epilepsy. And the fact that you do not know what you're dealing with, of course, gives life to all this stigma as to how you can treat it or what it is in the first place. So somebody even in the feedback said their child was given herbal medicine and they're good today. So, as a doctor, yes. What are you hearing?
I think I hear that people are really struggling to get answers out there for epilepsy. And they look at any way. Some even go for prayers, some go for witch doctors, and sometimes even families break because of epilepsy. Now, herbal medicine, we don't have a lot of evidence that it works, you know, a really tight, you know, evidence, trials that have been done that they work. Now, I'm not going to talk about that because I don't have evidence for it, but I know for sure that there are some epilepsies, even without treatment, they will outgrow you, you know. So whether you go for prayers, and I've had this in our clinics, they say sometimes, I went to herbal and I got better. Some say I went for prayers and it's no more. Some
so in this case, is exorcism.
Yes, and
okay.
So I went to the witch doctor and it's okay. But for me, I know around 30% to 40%, their epilepsy will just go even without treatment, you know. But they suffer, you know, during that period of time, whether it's 2 seizures, whether it's 3 seizures, whether it's 10, they really undergo a lot of difficulties. It's difficult times because seizures are, they don't tell you when I'm going to come. It's very uncertain. The anxiety, when is it going to come? How, you know, so parents get a lot of anxiety, they get depressed, thinking about their children. And if you are a teenager, you know, you don't know where it's going to happen. Is it going to happen at a party with your friends or peers? Is it going to happen when you are doing your exam? So that anxiety also, it's difficult times, whether it's a mild form of epilepsy or whether it's the difficult to treat ones or they require treatment for the rest of your life. And you really need to understand yourself. As Sally said, you know, you really need to understand, you know, yourself. And no, I have epilepsy, I have this condition. What will be my positive coping strategies? Because if you have negative coping strategies, it will weigh down on you, definitely. Yes.
Okay, we have Maureen back on the line from Nairobi. What's your question or comment? Oh, we seem to be having a difficult time reaching Maureen, but hey, remember you can reach us using those numbers at the bottom of your screen, even as we understand epilepsy much better this morning. We'll be right back.
Maji mdosi wangu ametupa simu yangu ndani ya maji.
Mdosi wako kwa sawa? Venye Nkirota ameniambia ajui na akimpigia simu ashiki. Hi! Guy! What the? Let them know irritation.
For the women who deserve more, Moped is now in Kenya and more than 40 countries. With its nylon-free surface, new Moped has unique softness and up to 100% protection. Your skin will love it.
Breaking news from Molfix. Let's see what they're developing right now.
Molfix pants with anatomic fit technology. New Molfix pants, an invention from babies for babies.
You should also try Molfix.
From far with you. I even gifted you a magnificent house. Rosa, it's the thought that counts. Please help me.
When it comes to fever, you need to be both. Panadol Baby and Infant starts to work on fever in 15 minutes and is gentle on the tummy. Panadol Baby and Infant, tough on fever, gentle on your child.
To achieve great things in life, you must do little things every day, like the 1, 2, 3 with Colgate.
1, wake up. 2, brush up. 3, smile through your day with a fresh breath and strong tea. Smile through your day with a fresh breath and strong tea.
Do the 1, 2, 3 with Colgate and give yourself a future to smell about.
By Awiko and Mr. Seed, dial star 812 star 802 hash. Skiza Na Nation.
Absa Bank at 1. Capital adequacy and risks in the operating environment.
We look at the minimum capital ratios, we put buffers on top so that we're not flying close to the regulatory minimums.
Revenue diversification and the challenges faced.
One of the concerns I had when you were unveiling the Absa Asset Management was that you were venturing into the space at a time when the investable opportunities in the capital markets were clearly being eroded.
Risk pricing beyond the rate cap regime.
Yeah, we do a lot of modeling of our business and of our customers and the risks that we're willing to take.
In the next edition of Business Redefined, we host the Chief Executive Officer of Absa Bank for this and more.
Try Panadol Advance for relief from headaches, body aches, and fever. With Panadol's Optizorb formula, the tablet gently breaks down in the stomach, quickly absorbs, and starts providing pain relief in 15 minutes. For fast and effective pain relief that you can trust, try Panadol Advance.
Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gachanja. Today we're taking time to understand epilepsy. Actually, February 4th is an International Day of Epilepsy Awareness globally, and that was done, and many still have those questions. This kifafa we hear about locally, what exactly is it? What causes it? And how can those living with this condition have a quality life? And that's what we're answering this morning with the help of Dr. Eddie Chengo, who is an epileptologist, which is an epilepsy specialist, Sally Njenga, who is a person living with epilepsy, Millicent Kadarani, who is a caregiver to a young man with epilepsy, and Frederick Beuchi, who is an epilepsy awareness activist. Thank you for staying on this conversation. We have somebody on the line, Octavia from Rongai, with a question or a comment. Go ahead.
Hi, Gladys.
Hi.
How are you?
Well, thank you.
My name is Octavia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a caregiver of a child Hello? Hello? Hello, Gladys? You can hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was saying,
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate whatever you're doing,
Karibu sana.
even creating the awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I had a daughter who was diagnosed with epilepsy when she was 4.
Mm-hmm.
That was back in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
We've been on medication, just like the doctor is saying,
Mm-hmm.
that with the right medication and the right diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
a child can, or someone can be seizure-free or can get cured of epilepsy.
Uh-huh.
My daughter has been taking medicine from 2013
Mm-hmm.
up to last year, June.
Yes.
That's when we stopped.
Okay.
And we thank God from then up to now, we've not had any episode.
Aha. All right. Thank you for sharing,
Yeah.
Octavia.
And what I would want to suggest, I don't know now how the government can help us
Mm-hmm.
or help patients,
Mm-hmm.
because medication is very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
The medicine themselves, like my daughter was taking two types of medicine. It was too expensive. It's very expensive.
Okay.
I don't know whether they can give us subsidies.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's quite expensive.
All right.
It's expensive to maintain.
Thank you for pointing that out, Octavia, and have a wonderful day. Let me hear from those who also have this experience. Sally, what is your experience with treatment and even diagnosis? Is that an expensive affair for you too?
Let me first with diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, those tests are really expensive, and then they are not available in all hospitals. So even having the right diagnosis is not that easy. Then when it comes to medication, for instance, last year I was put on medication. Looking at the cost, it was going for more than 5,000 shillings. For somebody who is not earning any income, it will be really expensive. For now, I have really improved, so the price has reduced.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, even the medications are quite expensive. It is a challenge.
All right. Now, you sound like you fund your treatment off pocket. Do you have an insurance cover?
No, I don't have an insurance cover.
Have you ever tried NHIF?
Okay. I'm on HIF, but
Mm-hmm.
those medications are not in the hospitals.
So the issue is the availability of the medication, not the financial support.
Okay. You can have the medical cover,
Mm-hmm.
but for instance, when I was still in school, I was under my mom's medical cover,
Mm-hmm.
and in less than 6 months, you have already
Depleted
spent the
it.
whole amount.
Uh-huh.
They are still too expensive.
I hear you. I hear you. Okay, and for you, Mama Sam, Millicent, hizi dawa ambazo Sam anakunywa unazilipia vipi?
Kule anapewa tunalipa 300 shillings per month.
300 shillings per month. Na anatumia dawa kiwango gani kila siku?
Anatumia tembe 2 usiku.
Na kuna mtu kusaidia na that amount ama pesa inatoka mfukoni?
Huwa tu tuna hata kwa saa hii hata yeye ndio huwa anaenda tu juu kuna kabiashara anafanya. Yeye ndio huwa tu anaenda anajilipia, but kama ana huwa na provide.
Na wakati ulienda test ndio mjue nini ilikuwa inasumbua Sam, mulilipa pia kutoka kwa mfuko?
Nikianza kwenda Kiambu ama nilienda Kiambu kwanza. Nitumia mfuko tu yangu kufanywa hiyo test ya damu. Hata hiyo EEG mimi ndo nilijilipia tu bado.
Okay. Ushai kujaribu NHIF?
NHIF niko nayo but ni yangu. Sasa ni mtu mzima anafaa kukua na yake after 18 years. Unafaa yeye anafaa kujisimamia sasa.
Wakati alikuwa mchanga ilimsimamie?
Hata nimechukua akishafikisha 18.
Okay. So Frederick, what is your experience with treatment?
My experience with treatment, as Octavia has said, is definitely the same story. It has been expensive from the point of even finding the right diagnosis, just getting to her going for the test, and then thereafter being prescribed the medication that she had to use. So it was expensive, and that's when we also began feeling the pinch in terms of economy. There are things that we had to forego as a family to make sure that at the end of the day, if it is the family having 2 meals, so that at the end of the day the sister gets the medication, then we had to do exactly that. But I also want to speak, Gladys, from a point of we currently have the National Epilepsy Coordination Committee. I happen again to sit there as the secretary of the committee, and I know one of its mandate is to try as much as they can to advise the government in terms of how they can make the anti-epileptic drugs affordable and available to persons living with epilepsy. And this conversation has been ongoing through a campaign called Angaza Kifafa, which as we speak today has covered about 18 counties. So we are hopeful that at some point this conversation about anti-epileptic drugs being expensive and not being affordable is totally going to change.
All right. Now, with the perspective from the committee's point of view, do we have insurance companies covering epilepsy fully? Does NHIF also support financially?
I would talk of the national cover, which is the NHIF, which to some extent covers people to get anti-epileptic drugs. But it has been a challenge to actually get other insurance companies to cover persons living with epilepsy, because it's considered to be a chronic condition, and I don't want to believe that should be the basis really of not getting people living with epilepsy a good cover to access medication and even go for the EEG test, because we have so many other chronic conditions that are being covered. And so this should also be like a wake-up call to the many other insurance companies that have not really given so much thought in being able to cover people living with epilepsy.
All right. So, Dr. you emphasize that it doesn't matter what kind of epilepsy you live with. It has some sort of suffering that comes with it, and if not treated, it can actually put you in a very precarious situation. So what is the ideal situation in as far as how the cost of treating this condition should be?
Zero.
It should be free.
It should be free.
Yes.
You know, I'm saying that because you know, one thing that is happening now, I think globally, you know, so many studies are being done on anti-epileptic drugs, and new anti-epileptic drugs are coming. In Kenya, the ones that are available in our public hospitals are maybe 4, you know, which will not treat all the epilepsy types. We have around 20 anti-epileptic drugs. And I think that's why Sally says, you know, her medicine is very expensive. And I can say that's even fair. There are people who use around 30,000 per month for anti-epileptic drugs. If you use like 2 new generation anti-epileptic drugs at high doses, that cost can reach up to 20,000 or even more sometimes. So it's a very, very expensive affair. And I think the thing is, even the one that pays 300 shillings, as much as we see it's a small amount of money, but it's still money, and some people cannot afford that.
And cumulatively,
it's a lot of money, you know. So if the drugs are cheap because they're available in the public hospitals and they treat your seizure types, then you're lucky. But sometimes that doesn't happen, you know, so you move. And that's why there's this rhetoric of saying, like, epilepsy is not treatable because I used this drug, it didn't work. I went, they changed another drug, it didn't work. So I stopped. I decided to go for herbal, or I decided to go for, you know, for prayers or for some rituals. And it's just because, you know, the drugs that are available in the public hospitals are not treating that epilepsy type.
Okay. And how about infrastructure? Do we have enough equipment, at least to support diagnosis?
Not really. You know, epilepsy, in Kenya we have around more than 1 million people with epilepsy, and maybe around 30 EEGs in the country at the moment, you know, but mostly in the private sector, not in the government facilities. So EEGs have to be done at the private sectors. And then when it comes to specialists, we have around 20 neurologists and some fellows, so it's really encouraging. And also the people who are very interested or very passionate about epilepsy, and they treat epilepsy very, very well. So but there are few clinicians, you won't get them. You'll find them once in a month, maybe in a certain clinic. They go there and they see around 40 patients. Of course, they help these patients, but that's not enough. These patients need to sit with you, understand them. You know, they tell you what it feels to have 1 seizure in a year. It's different for a person who has 3 seizures in a year or 10 seizures in a day. You know, what really pinches them? What is the effect of epilepsy in them? How do you capture that in 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Nearly impossible. So the infrastructure really needs to improve when it comes to epilepsy care in Kenya. Angaza Kifafa is doing a good thing, you know, with the help of Bank of Africa. I also happen to sit as the vice chair of the National Epilepsy Coordination Committee. So number one thing, awareness. People should be aware that epilepsy is a treatable medical condition, but more importantly, try to lobby for a better infrastructure for epilepsy in Kenya.
Very well said. We have Grace from Kisii on the line. What's your question or comment? Grace? Grace, unanisikia? Grace, unanisikia? Do we have Grace on the line? Okay, we seem to be having a technical hitch on that end. And I'd like to understand from Frederick, there's also, according to the Kenyan Constitution and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, a person is disabled when they are hindered in their common day-to-day activities due to a physical and or a mental challenge. Would you consider epilepsy a disability? Is this something that you fronted to support those that have severe disease?
Yes, absolutely, Gladys. Epilepsy is considered to be one of the forms of disability because they make a person not really completely disabled, but the fact that they are not able to live a normal life at some point of their life because of the seizures that they undergo sometimes, then they are considered in that bracket. And for this reason, we work very closely with the National Council for Persons with Disability in making sure that if it is a person living with epilepsy, then they are registered, they get a disability card, so that at the end of the day also they are able to get the benefits for the persons living with disability. It incapacitates one to live a normal life like any other person, although we still stress on the fact that if these seizures are controlled, then somebody has an opportunity to lead and live a normal life.
Okay, and even as we're still trying to understand the prevalence of the same, earlier on, Dr. we had the story focusing on the fact that Kilifi has a high prevalence of epilepsy. Why?
I think Kilifi has a high prevalence of epilepsy because of the causes of epilepsy. You know, epilepsy has so many causes. Anything that can damage the brain or injure the brain can cause epilepsy. And we know that in Kilifi, it's a malaria endemic, region. So probably because of the malaria and, this issue of one of the studies that was done in 2005, I think, and published probably in 2008, showed that perinatal problems was one of the greatest risk factor for getting epilepsy. So that's another factor also probably increasing the prevalence of epilepsy in Kilifi. But I can say also you might find other areas with high prevalences because of other reasons as well. For instance, if you, areas where they eat a lot of uncooked pig or something like that, and the worms cause epilepsy. So the epilepsy there will be prevalent, but from a different cause. And we also know now, or we think that what is going to happen in future is that epilepsy may change its age group onset because of the border riders and a lot of head injuries happening now in hospitals. You'll realize that some of the hospitals have even spared a special ward for the riders, because of the injuries they face. And some of the injuries are head injuries. So you'll maybe realize that in 10 years to come or so, epilepsy will be more in adults, or maybe it will be equal in children and adults, and the causes will be head injuries as a result of accidents. So I think it just depends on the causes. But Kilifi, malaria we know is there, and the perinatal problems.
So still with malaria, are we saying then all the areas around water bodies, Western, Nyanza regions also have a higher prevalence?
Yes, those areas could be having a higher prevalence of malaria because, again, of the malaria thing. Cerebral malaria is bad, and that can really, it is a very big risk factor for getting epilepsy.
Okay, we have Grace back on the line. She joins us from Kisii. What is your question or comment, Grace?
Okay, thank you, Gladys. I have got a niece who has a problem with epilepsy.
You have what?
Now, a niece, my sister's daughter. She grew up well until the time she joined boarding in class 7 in Molo. Then she started developing seizures at night, shaking, making some funny noise. Then finally, they expelled her from school. They said they could not contain her. She came home to a day school. Now, she used to have those seizures at night. Later on, she started having them during the day. Now, alipofika Form 1, 2, she started even falling the day. Then the girls could run away, the teachers, they will not touch her. Finally, they also didn't want, they could not contain her in school. They put her off, but when they went and talked to the county director, they admitted her as a day scholar. Now, another funny thing, she normally develops those seizures at night, and I shake so vigorously, making some funny sound. Now, when she's recovering, she passes urine, then she becomes sober.
Okay.
Now, another thing, she may increase weight so much. She's now 16, but she weighs over 90.
Okay.
Alianza treatment in Kisii, akaenda Kisumu. They have visited a psychiatrist. She went to Nairobi. She was treated by Dr. Mayo. But that thing is still there. Amejaribu habo, nothing. Now, I was asking the child, what kind of epilepsy is that? Can she be assisted?
All right. Thank you for your question, Grace from Kisii. She's talking about her niece, and clearly she's had the seizures on and off, but most of them now happen at night. And now she says she's gained so much weight, and they also stopped the medication. So they're trying to figure out what the medication doesn't seem to be working. So what are they dealing with?
wow, no, that's epilepsy. You see, she's defined it so well. Look at the missed opportunities in this young girl. She was in boarding school and then she had to go to day school because of the seizures. She's on medication that maybe it's, I can't clearly say that it's not working, but of course could be causing side effects because of the weight. I'm not sure about that because there are a couple of things that we need to ask and understand well. But clearly I'm saying that's epilepsy because you see the difficulties that people with epilepsy undergo, you know, and she's so confused. She started at night, then during the day, she's saying now she's passing urine and all this confusion and that kind of thing. So that burden is so huge in epilepsy. But now to answer her question is, I think she really needs to go to hospital and just share what she's just shared to us here. You know, because she's shared it so clearly. There are weight issues that need to be addressed. There is uncontrolled epilepsy that needs to be addressed. And I'm sure it can be addressed. If this drug that doesn't work, then another drug will work definitely. There are a couple of regimes that people can use. And probably if the epilepsy started at class 7, if I'm right, I think I had it right, class 7, that maybe she could be around maybe 12, 13 years. So a fairly normal child growing normally and then starts epilepsy at that age, I don't think that could be a difficult to treat epilepsy. It could be a lifelong, you know, maybe she could require treatment for the rest of her life, but it doesn't mean that it could be the one of the difficulties, epilepsy to treat. I don't know the cause, I don't know what happened during birth, I don't know what happened in between. So a lot of information is still needs to be out there for the doctor to treat well. But I believe it will work for her.
So perhaps shouldn't we be suggesting they see a specialist as opposed to a general practitioner, because clearly...
Yes, she needs to be seen by a neurologist. She needs to be seen by a neurologist or an epileptologist.
Okay, Grace, I hope you can take this up and see perhaps this will give you the answers that you need. We have Maureen back on the line. She's calling from Nairobi. What's your question or comment?
Hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
What's your question or comment?
My comment is, okay, I've lived with epilepsy. I developed epilepsy at 30.
30?
Now, at 30 years, when I was 30 years old. It was caused by a major depressive disorder after I'd taken some medication under care of a psychiatrist. Now, one thing I would want to comment about epilepsy, there's a lot of stigmatization, with this kind of condition. But the moment you get to see the right physician and you take your medication accordingly, like I'm under care of Professor Amayo, who is one of the best neurologists in this country. I'm on 3 types of medication. The moment you get to accept your condition and living positively, you're able to live your life to the fullest.
Yes.
And the moment your family is aware and they're sensitized and the general public, you can find certain times you're condemned by people, ule madam wa kuanguka, ile ugonjwa ya kuanguka, when you get a seizure maybe in town, nobody wants to touch you because they think you can, they can get infected. They believe it's infectious. So you're doing a great thing by sensitizing the public, and they need to know that epilepsy is not contagious. And the moment you get to take your medication, take them right on time. And just like the previous caller made a comment that the cousin, the niece is not getting better. It's not a condition you take medication once and then you're done. You have to keep on, like my dosages have reduced gradually and have quite improved,
Okay.
with time. So
All right.
I'd love to encourage the general public and the populace to understand epilepsy, live your life to the fullest. I'm a public servant. I'm registered with the National Council for Persons Living with Disability. And I know there are certain challenges like psychosocial challenges that can come along with this condition.
All right. Thank you, Maureen, for being so candid and sharing this with us, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
All right, so there you have it. You can live a full quality life if you have the right intervention and definitely the right treatment cycle for you. Now, we take another short break here on Your World. When we come back, I'd like Dr. to tell us, is epilepsy classified as a mental illness? We'll be right back.
Working together today, it is creating opportunities for a lifetime of happiness. The future is bright because you can always bank on family. Money Bank, with you for life.
Timeless love.
You are now holding the evidence.
This picture is not an evidence, Geronimo. Please, yes, I'm in it, but she's my sister. And her name also starts with the letter R.
I'm sure they found me out, and I don't even know what I'm gonna tell her, Mom. It would be your word against a dead man's word.
Don't lie to me anymore, Renata. Just tell me the truth.
No! Not until you realize that you're the one who's always been wrong. Follow me.
Oh my, all hell broke loose. Oh my goodness. Unfortunately, my daughter is a great liar.
This is my charm, and that one is Roberta's. I was wearing this the day we got married. You're the one who has been confused all this time.
Timeless love.
Beat sensitivity pain fast with Sensodyne Rapid Action for clinically proven relief in 60 seconds.
Past few years, yoga studios like this one began popping up all across the country, from luxurious beach resorts to slums in major cities. I'm in Nairobi to find out how entrepreneurs are cashing in on the wellness industry. Namaste.
I came to discover that moringa oil is actually an amazing beauty secret for hair and skin.
Since 10 years, I'm taking moringa every day, and this is where we come to this project.
Welcome to Insignia Service Center, a state-of-the-art service center that offers diagnostics, repairs, wheel balancing and alignment, and a fully fledged high-quality paint booth. Insignia Group, consistent excellence.
Hakuna tena siri amechanganya moyo amegawanya ya kumbe lipita kunusa penzi amelipangusa nalia.
To get Subira by Ibra featuring Skill Bill, dial star 812 star 799 hash. Skiza Na Nation.
Make a date with us on Monday 15th February as Magical Kenya launches a new set of signature experiences. We unveil a new face of authentic and unique experiences that represent Africa in one place. Catch the event on NTV Monday from 7:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. Magical Kenya. Rediscover the magic.
I
I won't deny that just for a moment I thought that, well, it would be a good idea for my dad to be happy again next to someone.
So that woman can send you to a boarding school, huh, Fernanda? Would you like that? And then, I don't know, have other children with your father? Just imagine that. It means you'll have to share absolutely everything you have with those new children.
If you want to do her a favor, tell her not to meddle in other people's business, okay? I could never dare to tell her that. I'd practically be giving myself away to her.
A lot of pain, love.
Heaviness and a burning inside, it could be heartburn.
Indigestion and heartburn? Eno gets to work in 6 seconds and works on the 6 symptoms of heartburn so you can keep living life non-stop. Eno, fight heartburn and indigestion fast.
Try Panadol Advance for relief from headaches, body aches, and fever. With Panadol's Optizorb formula, the tablet gently breaks down in the stomach, quickly absorbs, and starts providing pain relief in 15 minutes. For fast and effective pain relief that you can trust, try Panadol Advance.
Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gachanja. Let's take a look at the other world. Now, with restaurants and cafes closed due to the pandemic, an alternative is emerging among Brussels hoteliers, transforming rooms into private dining rooms to enjoy an evening like that of a restaurant, but in compliance with the law. It was a COVID-era conundrum for Valentine's Day, how to eat out with your beloved when you live in a country where all restaurants are closed. Now, the answer hit upon by a handful of hotels in Belgium's capital was to convert empty rooms into private dining salons for two, where a 4-course meal with champagne and wine was enjoyed without breaking the household bubble. And to the United States, and with restaurants, of course, also closed, there are some that have had... All right, and... perhaps we can actually go back to some of those phone calls we were taking earlier, even as we get our stories aligned. And we have who on the line? Batten from Sabatia. What's your question or comment? Okay, let's have that question we had earlier on to Daktari. First of all, before we take it up, is epilepsy classified as a mental illness, Daktari?
Thank you, Gladys. That's a good question. And the simple answer is no. Yeah, no. Why? Because epilepsy is a neurological problem. Of course, we understand that the same brain will also have some mental illnesses or diseases. And sometimes some of the factors or some of the symptoms, and I think even in your definition, when you started defining epilepsy, there was that part that you said, you know, abnormal behavior, feelings and sensation, even anxiety. Anxiety is an epilepsy sign as well as a psychiatry sign. But are we going to give the same treatment? The simple answer is no. So it's not in any way a mental health problem.
So perhaps, so perhaps the question could be then, does epilepsy cause mental illness?
Yes and no. Yes, because some of the epilepsies, if not treated well, one of the factors that epilepsy can result into a mental illness will be if it's not treated early enough. So you have many seizures and treated epilepsies, then sometimes you can have epilepsy. Some types of epilepsy can also have some mental health signs or some psychiatry, problems. And we know, even we understand now, some studies have shown us that if you have, say, affective disorder and you have epilepsy, that's one of the most lethal combination in terms of, say, suicide. You are 32 times more likely to commit suicide if you have affective disorder and epilepsy. And these are studies that have been done in Europe. So sometimes epilepsy can do that. And sometimes also, psychiatric diseases also, you can present with psychiatric disease and then later on present with epilepsy. Now, it's difficult to know which came first. You know, it's like the question, you know, between the egg and the chicken, which came first. You know, it's difficult to answer that. But we know that sometimes they can occur together, sometimes one can cause the other, but they're different conditions altogether.
All right.
Yes.
So do we have Baton from Kisii on the line, or rather from Sabatia? Baton, go ahead.
Hello.
Hello. What's your question?
Hello. Hello. Mimi niko na mgonjwa. Na huyu mgonjwa saizi amefikia umri wa miaka 30. Na alipoanza hatukujua ni nini ilifanyika. Tulikuja gundua tu akiwa na umri wa 20 years hivi. Alikuwa na ugonjwa na mshika usiku, akimaliza na kojoa. Tutambo tumpeleka hospitali, tukapewa madawa hospitali. Lakini bei ikawa ghali, bado hatupati kupona. Na kile kinatusumbua saa hizi, hata kuongea saa hizi, ulimi kuongea inakuwa shida, mikono sasa kushika vitu inakuwa shida. Sasa tunashindwa ni wapi, ni kipi tunaweza fanya, ama tunaweza kumsaidia namna gani. Isipokuwa sasa unamshika usiku, akikosa kupata madawa mpaka hata anaunguka usiku, hata mchana pia ni hivyo hivyo tu.
Okay. All right. Asante Baton kwa kutupigia simu, na I'm sure the doctor has some answers for you. To start with, what can this family do? Because clearly there are other complications that come with untreated epilepsy.
Yeah, that is definitely untreated epilepsy, or maybe it's not untreated. They say that they tried as much as they can and they went to hospital, but a little bit late. So they, again, I insist they go for a specialist review. That is going to help them, you know, a lot, because there are a couple of issues that need to be addressed there. Number one, to get the right diagnosis, the medical diagnosis or the syndromic diagnosis, just to understand the type of epilepsy that his brother has, so that he can get the right treatment. And I think they're going to get help if they get a specialist review.
Okay.
Yeah.
Frederick, I hear a lot of people who have loved ones, I mean, with severe forms of epilepsy, but they do not have the finances to support their treatments. At the committee level, and perhaps from Angaza Kifafe's point of view, are there institutions that can actually offer these services pro bono?
Yes, Gladys, there are organizations that can support to some extent. NECC is an umbrella body of so many other organizations and institutions that deal with epilepsy. So we have from a range of organizations that entirely deal with awareness raising, awareness creation. We have those that are dealing with empowerment of persons living with epilepsy. And we also have those that entirely, they are looking at how best they can be able to support persons with epilepsy access medication. So that provision is there. What I can just encourage people is to come out. You hear that there's a friend who has the condition, but they're struggling to get medication. Just come out and approach NECC or any of these organizations under NECC, and you should be able to really get some help from them. I'm not saying entirely help in terms of medication that will take you all along the period that the doctor has prescribed, but to get to a point of where you can start on a proper medication that will carry you along to give you a normal life or even manage your seizures right.
Frederick, is there perhaps a number you can share? Because most people are saying, if I knew what I could do, perhaps I would be directed to the right place. Do you have a number?
Yeah, sure. I can share a number, but before I do that, I would also like people to just check in the National Epilepsy Coordination Committee website. You can also go on our social media pages at National Epilepsy coordination committee, and you should be able to actually get information there and even see the other organizations that can help. In terms of giving out a number, I would want them to feel free to call 0729 747 026.
Say that again.
0729 747 026.
Thank you, Frederick. And to a question or two from social media, remember that hashtag is new normal, even as we understand epilepsy this morning and also the challenges of living with the same. The first question is from... We have Kinuthia David, who says, when someone falls, what is the fast aid process? Good question. Martin K says, does epilepsy have triggers? Good question, Martin. Thank you for coming through. Now, we'll start with the first question, Dr. Epilepsy first aid. We've heard from our callers that at times people do not know what to do. Yes. You know, you might not be afraid, but you really do not know how to help this person. So if somebody is having a seizure, what do I do?
Okay, thank you very much, Gladys. Now, before I answer that question, the story of Barton really touched me. And this is what I'd like to maybe just mention a few things to him and to encourage Barton. Number one, you know, the government system, the way it operates, you start from a dispensary, you go to a health center, you go to a sub-county hospital, and then county hospital, and then the national hospital. So maybe there could be some difficulties for him to get a specialist for himself. Where does he find a specialist? But if he goes back to that hospital, you know, that hospital has systems. Every hospital, even when you go there, you find a clinical officer. The clinical officer, if he's unable to do something, they call a medical officer. The medical officer will call a consultant, maybe physician, surgeon, whatever, depending on the condition that the patient has. So I would really advise him, even if he goes back to the same hospital and says, this is what has been happening. I've been taking this medication, but my brother is worsening day by day. The clinician in charge there will be able to consult other clinicians until his brother gets better. So maybe that could help him a little bit. So don't stay at home, Mr. Barton, go to hospital. Now, coming back to first aid,
yes.
Number one thing is stay calm. You know, of course it terrifies when you see somebody convulsing, and sometimes they think that, wow, this is a gone case. So if you really need to help, is to stay calm, because the person needs help there more. They're unconscious, so they can hurt themselves badly. So when you stay calm, make sure that everything that can injure that person is kept away. For instance, if there's a table or there is maybe a machete or something where he's fallen, so make sure that the area is safe enough. And you may not have time to pull them to a safer place, so that place, just make it safe. Put your hands or a smooth or a cloth, if you have, under his head, because sometimes they tend to bang their heads, you know, on the ground. So you can use your hand to do that. Make sure that they lie, you know, on their side. That also encourages, or that helps in if they're frothing or if they have bit their tongue and they're bleeding, they will not choke themselves. So putting them on their side is very, very critical at that point in time. And then wait for them. Don't restrain them from jerking, because it doesn't help anyway, you know, and you may just injure them because you're pressing too hard on them, you know. So just let them jerk so long as they don't hurt themselves, and then within a short time, a seizure lasts for around a minute or 2 minutes at most, and then it will be over. There are a couple of things that we need to do. Number one, do not put anything in the mouth.
Oh.
So I understand that people say, he might beat himself, so let's put something in the mouth, like a pen or a spoon or something. That can even be more dangerous because they can choke. When you do that, they need the air more, and you have to make sure that the air is patterned. So when you put something, you're blocking the airway, you know, and you may also injure their teeth in the process because they're tightening their mouth, and therefore that can also cause another problem. Don't give anything to drink or to eat at that point in time until they are fully conscious, and then when they wake up, make sure that you also calm, you know. They're coming from a seizure, so when you're in a panic mood, you know, like, you know, that kind of thing. They may also get frightened and that kind of thing. So talk to them calmly. If you know their name, it's even better. Call them by their name, like, you've had a seizure with you here. Do you have any pain? You know, that kind of thing. I know not all seizures end like that. Some of them will end with a confusion. So they will wake up and start walking, or they might even start to run away. You can hold them, but not that tightly. You know, just guide them through until you make sure that they're fully conscious and they're back to normal.
So really it's to reassure them?
Yes, you have to reassure them, you know, because if you panic then, especially for parents, when kids wake up, you are in a prayer mode and you're praying, you're casting the demons and that kind of thing. The first thing that comes to the child will be, I had a demon. You know, it's not bad to pray. I encourage praying. I'm a believer, so, so I know what prayer means. But sometimes when it comes at that point in time, then the child can be more scared and get confused.
Okay.
You know?
To the second question, what triggers the seizures for those with epilepsy? What are the common triggers?
Epilepsy has many triggers, but the commonest is, number one, missing medication. If you skip or you miss your medication, that's a biggest trigger. I'm going to bold that. Make sure that you take your medication every day at the right time. I know it's difficult, but that's number one trigger. Number two trigger, or maybe the rest of the trigger, is fatigue. If you're emotionally stressed out, like Sally said, you know, that can trigger a seizure. Lack of sleep can also trigger a seizure. Hunger, you know, if you don't take your meals, can trigger a seizure. In women, sometime during the monthly periods, that can trigger a seizure. Lights, you know, if you know, if there are people who, when there's a lot of light or flickering light, can trigger their seizures. So if they watch TV too much or they're on the computer too much, that can trigger their seizures. You know, and there are other triggers that are special to different people. There are people who their triggers are special sounds and sensations. You know, so if they hear certain sounds, maybe loud music or something like that, they can trigger their seizures. And some people, so unique, you know, triggers, you'll never hear them, even in books. And they tell you, and you can't deny. I had patients that come and they tell me, I hear some type of music, I get a seizure. And they tell you specifically this type of music. There's one who came and they say, I get a seizure when I start washing my clothes. And some say when I eat certain food, you know. And when we understand our triggers, then we are able to, you know, avoid them and probably live a more fulfilling and a comfortable life.
All right. We have a last caller, at least for now, from Washera.
Hello, Gladys. Good morning.
Good morning. What's your question or comment?
My question is about my cousin. He has been living with epilepsy since he was 12. Right now he's 40. And the problem is that he uses phenobarbital and another medicine which has a sugary coating on top. He has been getting vitu kama growth kwa mdomo. Then the next question is, it's about the triggers. When he has a cold or when he's unwell, the seizures become worse.
So
Yeah.
I think that has already been answered with the different trigger points that Dr. was talking about. So you need to be keen on what it is that triggers them and also control the same, right?
Okay.
All right. So to that first question that Washera has.
On the drug issue, sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't get it quite clearly towards the end,
Okay,
but I
sure.
heard that she's using phenobarb and then...
She has some sort of growths in her mouth.
Oh,
Is that a
growth.
side effect?
Well, that could be a side effect. I don't know when that happened, but I think some of the things require a clinical examination, you know. So I would really advise her to go to hospital and see a doctor and examine what type of growth she has in the mouth. Because remember also, you can have epilepsy and other conditions as well. So not everything is related to epilepsy.
All right. And there's a question here. For pregnant mothers and you're epileptic, is there a special regime that they have to take to protect both themselves and the child they're carrying?
Yes, there is. There are some medicines that we can't give during pregnancy, and we also don't advise even in female sex. So that's very, very important. And the doctors also know about that, you know, because before you prescribe, you have been taught about medication. So many a times doctors will give the right medicine for a certain gender, maybe age groups. Even age groups, there's some medicine that when you give for a certain age group, it causes a lot of side effects. It's a very, very good drug. And I'll give you an example. Phenobarbital is a very, very good drug. I really love it. I prescribe it, you know, because it's cheap, it's available, and it works well for most of the seizures. But there are certain age groups I don't give it, or if I give it, I watch very, very closely because of the side effects it has. So I think that's it. We have to understand, the doctors have to know that this pregnant woman, I'm not going to give these drugs, and I'm going to do counseling on them, how they're going to, because it's a risk pregnancy for some reason. So how they're going to deliver, how they're going to take care of the baby, you know. For instance, I can give an example. If you have epilepsy, we prefer that when you're feeding your baby, you are sitting on the floor, or when you're bathing the baby during the first few, you know, months, you would rather wipe them other than put them in a basin of water, because that is risky. If you have a seizure there and your child is in a pool of water or something like that, they can drown and you can lose them. So we give different advices on care and the right medication during and after pregnancies. And even family planning as well.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Because some of the drugs can interact with some of the family planning medication. So we give the right drugs for the right family planning.
Okay, clearly a lot of information here, and what we need to underscore is that you need to be diagnosed and also be on the right treatment plan. And please disclose fully to the specialist so that they are able to work with you, especially with the care part. Now we're bringing this conversation to a close. Briefly, Sally, let us know first of all who your support system and what you would like to tell Kenyans in as far as working with those with epilepsy.
Thank you. My support system mostly it's my family, my immediate family, my mom and my siblings. They have been my biggest support system since day one. I can't remember a day I was sick and they were not there for me. My friends have also come in hand, so I'm really grateful. And what I have for people who are living with epilepsy, maybe the only thing I can say is step out, accept that you are living with the condition. I usually say, I'm not Sally the epileptic, I'm just living with a condition. You accept it, and from there it will make it really easy. You're a star, you are meant to shine. Don't let epilepsy hinder you from shining.
Well said, Sally. Thank you. And to Mama Sam Millicent. Sasa mtoto wako unaona anaendelea na maisha kawaida, anakunywa dawa zake. Nani anasimama na wewe kila siku?
Kusimama na mimi ni dada yake na ndugu yake, firstborn wangu na huyo mwingine msichana.
Familia sasa wali accept ile condition na pia wanasema ni sawa, yeye ni mtoto wetu tu.
Hakuna walimu accept tu.
Sawa, ungetaka kuambiaje wale ambao hawaelewi kifafa na wanapatia wale wako na kifafa ngumu?
Ningependa tu kusema kifafa ni ugonjwa tu kama ugonjwa zingine. Sasa kama uko na mtoto ako na kifafa, umsupport na umpeleke hospitali. Kuna wazazi wako na tabia ya kuficha watoto. Wengine mtoto ako na shida, unamficha kwa nyumba. Usifiche mtoto kwa nyumba, mpeleke hospitali. Na ukifuata maagizo ya daktari vizuri, ukitumia madawa vizuri, utaishi maisha ya kawaida kama watu wengine.
Asante sana. All right. Now, Frederick, this has become part and parcel of your life enough that you've taken up a couple of initiatives to support Angaza Kifafa. And the recent one is the Mount Kilimanjaro Challenge. Tell us more about that.
Well, the Mount Kilimanjaro Challenge was to create awareness about epilepsy across Africa. In the journey of creating awareness, I found out that it's not only in Kenya where there is a gap of information and knowledge about this condition, but it spreads across Africa. So, and in Africa we say if you want to make a very important statement, you either climb up a tree or go up the mountain. So it was a 2 weeks expedition, starting with cycling from Nairobi all the way to Arusha, Tanzania, and then we had an opportunity to climb Mount Kilimanjaro and shout out epilepsy at the top of the tallest mountain here in Africa. The target was to reach out to about 5 million people with information about epilepsy, and we are grateful because we were able to reach out to that target, and such opportunities that we receive by the media to continue spreading the word and awareness, we always appreciate, because it goes a long way in touching people's hearts and being able to get the right information that they can utilize in terms of what epilepsy is all about and the steps that they need to take.
Thank you, Frederick. And Dr. Definitely, I think after hearing what the callers had to say and even our panelists, there needs to be a challenge put across for fellow practitioners in the health sector. What are your parting shots?
Intelligent listening, number one. Number two, if a drug doesn't work, go to a next regime. Don't wait for too long. 3 months is enough. If it doesn't work for 3 months, go to another regime until it works for that particular patient. Thank you.
Very well said. That is Dr. Eddie Chengo. He is an epilepsy specialist. They call them epileptologists. We had Salin Jenga, who is living with epilepsy, joining us. Millicent Kadarani, who is a caregiver to a young man living with epilepsy. And of course, Frederick Beuchi, who is a well-known epilepsy awareness activist. Thank you all for joining us on this conversation, and to everyone that called us and also contributed on social media. Thank you for being part of this informative discussion, and in case of any questions, I think all the parties here are open to engage with you. Now, tomorrow, my colleague, that is Victor Kiprop, will be joining you on a conversation about insurance. Now, this is focusing on the industry, the regulation, if at all, and exactly what it means for you as a consumer. Is this money that actually comes to help you when you need it? You know, that constant investment every month. Does it come through to actually cater for you? And if not, what needs to be done to ensure that at least your money works for you? Stay tuned.